So I will go ahead and get started. Welcome, happy Thursday, and we are getting into kind of the the I guess whatever rhythm the semester is gonna go. We're getting into it, right? So, thanks for taking time out of your day to come and see us and to spend a little bit of time with us. I'm going to present again today. One of the things I will go ahead and put in the in the chat is one, I will put the PowerPoint presentation for today, just in case you want it. And the other thing that I am going to add is the article on which today's presentation is based. This is one that one of my students and I wrote up for the Journal of the First Year Experience and Students in Transition, which is a great journal. It was published in 2020. And so, yeah, we will talk about that. Let me go ahead and share my screen. And so you can read more details in the fuller conversation there. But one of the things that I also wanted just to talk about was this idea of community cultural wealth and the work of Tara Yosso. And so to start, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Erin Doran. I serve as a director of research and evaluation for Catch the Next. I'm the one who organizes the webinar speakers, and I've done some of the other research activities for Catch the Next, in part the study that I will be talking about today. I am also an assistant professor at Iowa State University. I teach in the School of Education, and I am my scholarly home is the community college leadership side of the Division of Higher Education. I am born and raised Tejana, so I lived in San Antonio. I was a community mentor for the Palo Alto Ascender program back when I still lived there, and I'm finishing out my 6th year up here at Iowa State. And so the purpose, just in case we have new folks, I recognize some names are a little bit new to me, so welcome and glad to see you here. I want to discuss some of the theories or some of the research that sort of underpin the work that we do within Catch the Next model. But if you haven't heard of Tara Yosso's work, and you can really just do a quick search of her work on Google Scholar and it'll come up, particularly the community cultural wealth article that I'm talking about that was published in 2005. Her work is phenomenal. I think that she's easily one of the foremost Chicana education scholars who is out there today. And then I want to be able to describe some of the research that I did and how Yosso's community cultural wealth framework came into understanding and describing what I observed at the Transfer Motivational Conference. So some of the relevant literature that we have, and that hopefully some of the names might be familiar to you. We've had Laura Rendon come out and either speak at the seminars or to present at the webinars, and she is one of the really godmothers of understanding the experiences of community college students, particularly students of color, of Latinx students. She came up with the idea of validation theory and how important it is for students of color to see themselves reflected in the campus culture where they attend, to have positive and affirming relationships with faculty and staff members, and how that contributes to sense of belonging for them, and how that helps them not drop out. It helps them to stay in school, to fulfill their academic goals and things like that. Stan Salazar has talked about the idea of social and navigational capital from institutional agents. And so this concept of institutional agents are who are the faculty, the staff, the student services personnel, the advisors, and things like that who engage with students and who help them navigate processes and relationships that help them be successful in school. So how do advisors maybe work to connect students with other people who can help them with financial aid or with understanding their degree plan or getting a part-time job or all of these different things, and how do those contribute to students' long-term success? How do they decrease the chance that a student is going to stop out or drop out? And then Carol Lundberg has done some great work on community college faculty in particular. So this 2014 study talks about how out of class interactions really matter to students and can really make a difference in helping them feel supported, and helping them to reach whatever goals they have, whether that is just making it through the end of the semester, making it through a specific class, or setting goals that will that are longer in term, longer in duration. And some of the things that we talk a lot about within the CTN familia, and I think it's just an ongoing conversation for a lot of community colleges, is what is the importance of building a transfer culture. So we have students who are getting their AA or AS degree. How do we ensure that we have clear articulation agreements so that students can seamlessly transfer to a four-year institution? How do we prepare them for that transfer process and what that looks like? If for students who are trying out college in their first semester, and may not know if college is really a thing for them, a viable option for them in the long term, how do we convince them to stay and convince them to see the value in starting at the community college and then not just stopping once they get that certificate or that associate's degree, to go on to maybe dream bigger than they thought for themselves? I think that overall, community colleges show an institutional commitment to the transfer function. I know when I still taught at the San Antonio, within the Alamo colleges, I taught in the San Antonio area at Northeast Lakeview College, and there was a specific transfer center that students could go to, and they could go talk to specific counselors who focused on the transfer to St. Mary's, Incarnate Word, Texas A&M, San Antonio, UTSA, et cetera. And I think this particular article by my former colleague, Lorenzo Weber, talks about the way that community-based organizations can play a role in supporting students. And so he was looking at a community-based organization that was based in the Chicago area. If you ever have trouble, a lot of these I understand are behind a paywall. If you are interested in reading any of these, please let me know. I'll be happy to get them for them. But Lorenzo Weber's particular article, I think, has a lot of connections to the work that we do here in CTN, or a lot of transferability. So Tara Yosso, she is a graduate of UCLA's doctoral program. I think she's one of the foremost scholars in Latino critical theory, or Lat Crit. She's co-written a lot with Daniel Solórzano, with other Chicana feminists like Dolores Delgado Bernal. She's currently a professor at the University of California, Riverside. And the text of the picture that I have on the right bottom corner, critical race counter stories along the Chicano educational pipeline. Really fantastic book. Most of her work is really aimed at looking at Chicana or Latino student success from an asset-based perspective. So not focusing on the poverty or on some of the deficit notions that we have. I think a lot of the stereotypes that scholars like Richard Valencia have talked about is this myth that Latino families or Latino students don't value education, when in fact educación is like a very deeply held value within Latino culture. And so it is rejecting negative stereotypes or negative images about Latinos and really trying to center the power and the wealth that they have that is specific to their communities. Oops. And so this particular text, this was published in 2005 by Tara Yosso. It came out in a journal called Race, Ethnicity, and Education, called Whose Culture Has Capital? A Critical Race Theory Discussion of Community Cultural Wealth. And so in it, she kind of or as she is setting up the explanation of this community cultural wealth model, she's doing three things or invoking sort of three ideas. First, she's talking about capital and really centering on the philosopher Pierre Bourdieu, and is talking about how ideas of social and cultural capital tend to frame communities of color from a deficit lens. So it tends to um, create this sort of hierarchy where the default or what we use to measure social capital, cultural capital is sort of based on a white upper middle class default. And so I think these are the kinds of things that you see play out in education around like critiques of, say, standardized testing, specifically SAT scores, for instance. We know nationally that white students tend to do better on standardized tests like the ACT or the SAT, because they may tend to have more access to things like college prep courses, money to pay for SAT prep courses that are offered after school or things like that. And so what she is trying to do is to get away from this sort of pinning concepts of success and of wealth and of capital away from a sort of white mainstream notion about that, and to really talk about racially minoritized populations and what sort of assets they have that can be harnessed, that can be leveraged. So she has a discussion of critical race theory and what sort of the tenets are of those. I think that the ones that she picks out that are most relevant to this article are in centering the voices and the lived experiences of racially minoritized communities, and a belief that there are assets that just haven't been leveraged by schools in a systemic way. And so how can we understand those? And how, in describing those, does that create some sort of launching point to have a shift in mindset, a shift in the scholarly conversation? And she does infuse this with lat crit. And so critical race theory is based on critical legal studies. This is a movement that came out in the 1980s. There are very politically charged discussions about it right now, as everyone well knows. The infusion of lat crit is to talk about Latino, Latina, Latinx communities specifically, and the ways that their identities and their experiences might intersect with things like immigration, excuse me, language acquisition and language use, being bilingual. What are things that are unique to the Latino community that can be understood as either sources of power or sources of oppression? And so the types of capital under the community cultural wealth model that Yosso brings up, she identifies 6 different ones. So you have a familial capital, a sort of kinship support network. This doesn't necessarily have to be a person's blood relations, but who are their kin? And how do they provide support, but also how do they provide communal memory to a particular person? And how might those stories um, or we talk a lot about in how to invoke things like dichos in our teaching and stuff like that. So how can those be brought in and harnessed as a space of power? Aspirational capital is in really thinking about the ability to have goals and the ability to dream. I find aspirational capital to be something that is incredibly hopeful. And for the students that we work with, I think that just by virtue of the fact that they are enrolling in college, we can assume that there is already some sort of aspirational capital there, either to get a certain degree or to be able to provide for their families, to get a job that will provide them with more either social mobility or financial stability or what have you. But I think that there's a goal or a dream for improvement. Navigational capital is how to navigate social systems. These can be processes, these can be people or structures or something like that. So it could be how an undocumented student files for DACA status. It could be how you register to vote. It could be how you register for classes. This can be thought of very broadly. Resistant capital is focused on just, I think, harnessing critical thinking for the purpose of challenging inequality and oppression. And so I think some examples of this could be either teaching students the value of education and the way that education can help do things like overcome generational poverty, and to talk about just broader issues of poverty, of racism, or things like that. I think that things like ethnic studies programs and the ways that ethnic studies pedagogy focuses on liberation and in understanding power relations between groups and societies and stuff like that. Enfranchising students with that sort of critical thinking skills to be able to challenge and to critique and ultimately to overcome where they can. Social capital is what sort of networks and community resources do folks have? And then finally, linguistic capital. Yosso talks about the ways that racially minoritized students often are navigating the world through different languages. And this doesn't necessarily have to be a binary between English and Spanish, for instance. We know that we may have students who speak multiple languages, or that there might be more domestic dialects like African American vernacular English, for instance, that is its own linguistic sort of sub pattern of English. And so how is that bilingualism or multilingualism actually a strength for students and not something that is a source of discrimination, for instance, or things like that? So how I looked at this, I mean, so Ascender is a program that operates on campuses across Texas. When I took on this study, this was not too long after House Bill 2223 was passed. A lot of our colleges were pivoting toward co-requisites and things like that. And we went through some different conversations within Catch the Next about which sort of courses to pair. And I recall, sitting with various stakeholders across the campuses who were looking at learning frameworks and saying, like, is this a good class to pair for this respective program? Learning frameworks wasn't necessarily a core course at first. Under the co-requisite policy, we had to make sure that all of the courses that were paired for students were ones that would count for a degree. So was learning framework something that would count toward all the students' degrees to make sure that they weren't just taking classes to take classes or to accumulate credits, which we know is really bad. And I think the other thing about it is some of the research that has been done on learning frameworks and other types of student success courses, there isn't necessarily a agreed upon explanation for how and why and if these courses are successful. I think in some cases they can be done really well. In other cases, I often give the example of my husband taught a learning frameworks type course here in Iowa at a community college within the state of Iowa. And that class just really became this sort of like dumping ground for content that the college was required to give to students but they didn't really know where else to deliver it to students. And so it was like this was a class where he had to introduce the advising system to students. They asked him to talk to students about financial literacy. Oh, you have to add active shooter training and just all of these different, alcohol education and just all of these different things. And so whatever the purpose of the course was, it was really hard to get to it. I have to admit, I am a huge fan of student success courses. When I think the instructor can do it right and can do what the course is intended to. And I see it as a success-oriented course aimed at fostering positive habits and mindsets for our students, many of whom are first generation, first time in college students. I will never forget doing an observation of an Ascender class. It was a learning frameworks class in particular. It was a Friday morning. It was the last, one of the last classes before the weekend. And the instructor just saying like, okay, everyone, like have a good weekend. I'll see you on Monday and I love you. And I just thought it was the sweetest thing, and how this particular instructor was just so vulnerable with his students and just saying like, I care about you. I want you to come back on Monday. So the data that I used for this particular study, it was collected in the summer of 2018. This was when I was able to attend the Transfer Motivational Conference that took place on the UT Austin campus. We had students who were there from ACC, El Paso Community College, South Texas College, Palo Alto, and I think that was it at the time. And fantastic multi-day experience where students were able to stay on the dorms, in the dorm rooms at the UT Austin campus. They were able to walk around Guadalupe Street and just sort of take in the campus culture, to be around downtown Austin. It was funny because a lot of the students took the time to walk down the street and go to In-N-Out Burger for the first time, since the rivalry between Whataburger and In-N-Out Burger is pretty funny. So it was a lot of fun to just sort of be able to sit down and observe students and see them interact with each other. And so over the course of the about 2.5 days that we were there, I was able to conduct interviews in small focus groups with students. I audio recorded them, they were transcribed. And then my thought partner in the article, his name is Paul Hingesteg. He is my thought partner and my co-author. He and I analyzed the data, and we were doing it with the idea of community cultural wealth in mind. And so how do we get here? Like, how do we get from students who are first time in college to getting to their graduation day and to the point where they can hopefully decorate their caps and know that they're going to transfer to a 4-year institution and all these different things. So some things that I describe in the article, which again, I have shared the article in the chat. Please, if you are moved to, please read it, please respond to it. Let me know what you think about it. But some things that we describe in it of different types of capital according to Yosso's model are familial capital, for instance. When I asked students to describe for me what their decision-making process was in deciding to be part of the Ascender program, most of the students were like, oh, I found out about it at orientation, or when I first sat down with my advisor, they told me that I qualified to enter this program. But one story that stuck with me was an Austin Community College student who had talked about how she had come with her mother to orientation, had received the information about it. And when she went home that night with her mom was really clear that she thought that the Ascender program would give her a built-in network of support that she could tap into and just already have from the first day of the fall semester. Other students who were just talking about being nervous about being in college for the first time, and what kind of discipline it was going to take for them to be successful in school. And so there were family members who helped convince them. I think something I mentioned later in the article that is talked about is how a student had gone to a family barbecue, and one of their distant relatives who had attended that was one of the program coordinators on one of our participating campuses, and she found out about the S&Ed program at a family barbecue, and the distant relative, the program coordinator, had convinced her to join the program. We have numerous examples of family members, an older sibling who joins the program, and then a couple of years later, their sibling or their cousin or whoever will also join it. And so, we make it a point to build familia within our respective colleges, within our network of colleges, but then it's also interesting to see how that convinces students to join the program. With navigational capital, there's a couple of different examples. I put here on the slide students organizing themselves for success. One of the things that I was really struck by, I mentioned a couple minutes ago that there's this mixed body of research about learning frameworks or student success type courses that we don't really know like what happens in them that makes a big difference. But one of the things that struck me is when I asked students about their learning frameworks class and what they felt helped them be successful, almost all of the students talked about the importance of a calendar and of the planner that they built skills about. So how something that I describe in the article is I was doing a focus group with some students, and to a person, all of them talked about the importance of planning and how they had never kept a planner before. There was one girl who said, I made fun of other people who kept planners, but now I can't live without mine. And I think more than anything, what it helped students do was it gave them a visual representation of their time. It gave them the ability to set realistic expectations and deadlines for themselves. And I think that visual representation helped them see how they could fit in all of these different responsibilities of their lives. That if they stuck to a plan, if they created that plan and stuck to it, that they were capable of being able to do all the things, if that included attending classes, going to tutoring, being a caregiver for their family, working at their family's business, like doing all of the things that they needed to do. And it provided some grounding for them so that it did not become overwhelming. One of the things that I found in this study that is supported by the study that was commissioned by the Texas Education Research Center, the Turk study that we had done several years ago, is the fact that students within the program end up receiving a lot of help with applying for financial aid. And that navigational capital comes in having an advisor or a faculty member who says like, hey, here are some grants or here are some scholarships. Here's how you research those. There's also, I think, a social capital to that, as it creates a network of people who can write letters of recommendations for grants, for instance. And we had one student who I talked to who actually worked in the financial aid office at her respective campus as a work study. And she was absorbing all of the things that she learned. And she was going back to her classes and talking to students about it, and said that that was something that she felt like she could do to give back, to share the knowledge that she was absorbing just by being in close proximity to the financial aid office, to be able to help other students and not just herself. The other thing that I think I was so struck by when I was having these conversations with these students was just how much knowledge and confidence they had about their transfer plan. And so, at the beginning of the school year, at the beginning of the semester, CTN asked the colleges to distribute a student survey. That in part we asked students how they feel on a scale of 1 to 5 about their confidence that they have the knowledge and skills to transfer and to meet their short and long-term academic goals. And a lot of times, we see that over the course of a semester or a year, that goes up. But by the time I was talking to these students about this, I mean, I had students who had like these very solidified 5-year plans for what it was that they were going to do. I recall talking to a student who was like, I want to be a social worker. So that's what I'm majoring in now. I know that I'm going to transfer to this university, and then I know I'm going to go get a master's degree in social work from this university. And it was like, bam, bam, bam. We had one student who was like, I want to study graphic design for my bachelor's program, but I also know that I want to join ROTC. And so she was living in South Texas and found a university in upstate New York that had both of the things that she needed from. And she was ready to do whatever she needed to do to transfer to, I think it was Syracuse University. And so it was just fascinating to see the confidence and the knowledge that students had in just saying, this is what I'm going to do. I talked to one student who had started at Palo Alto, had transferred to University of the Incarnate Word, which is a private Catholic university in San Antonio. And she said, you know what? I know that it would probably be cheaper if I had applied to say UTSA or A&M San Antonio, but I feel really good about the education I'm going to get. I know that when I go to take my nursing exams at the end of my BSN or what have you, I know that I'm going to be ready and I'm going to be able, Incarnate Word has a really good pass rate on it, for instance. So just so much confidence in that. Familia Capital, this is one of my favorite stories of Ascender, but a student at Austin Community College had talked about how, her parents were just so busy. They ran their own business. She often helped out her parents, translated for her parents, like really was like the linguistic broker for her parents and their business. And she was able to get her family to come to Noche de Familia the first semester that she was in the program. It ended up being really a rich experience for her and for her family because her parents were able to talk to folks in Spanish. They didn't feel like they were isolated. But one of the things that had been organized that night was a game of loteria. And the student's dad ended up winning. And he was just so happy because it was the first time he had ever won anything in his life. And that was just a memory that the student carried with her and was really excited to tell me about how it wasn't just her who was involved in it. It was her family who was involved in the program as well. And then finally, in terms of social capital, the way that the program operates and how it creates a network of students and mentors for the students. Students know and feel confident that even if they are past their first year of college and are not taking Ascender courses anymore, they know they can go back to their faculty members if they need letters of recommendation for a scholarship or for an application for school or things like that. And so what does it all mean? Thinking about the ways that this program really taps into this community cultural wealth, I think that for me as sort of the researcher and the observer of this, this was something that we had talked about as like a theoretical underpinning for the program, but it was neat to be able to go back and to say like, oh no, like this is documented, like we do this. Students can think about and interpret their experiences. And I can see this as like, hey, look, I can think about it in the way of aspirational capital, familial capital, or all of these different things. I think that in the ways that the research talks about the importance of faculty and student interactions, particularly in community colleges, we know that it's important. It is a high impact practice, and that the model that is built within this program provides that prolonged, deeper engagement, and provides in-class experiences as well as out of class, for things like Noche de Familia or university visits or campus events, or just whatever. That students are able to interact with these faculty for more than one semester, that they can engage with them at this motivational conference. And I think that overall, one thing that we do is we extend the notion of family. So students are able to experience a family unit, both in their personal lives, in their homes, however they might define it, but hopefully they feel like when they come to their college campus, they are doing that as well. And then I think overall, outside the scope of the study, but we know about different high impact practices that we embrace. And I think that when, for example, co-requisites became the policy, that was something that we were very eager to adapt to and to learn about and learn from, um, and so forth. So some different things just to throw out there. I have never done a perfect study. I would love to, but I doubt I ever will. There's always something more that I could have done or something different I could have done. The students who attend the Transfer Motivational Conference tend to be some of our most engaged students. They're not necessarily this, I think they're the students who are having the best experiences in Ascended, and are not necessarily going to tell me any sort of negative things that they might have encountered in the program. And so there is something to be gleaned from detractors as well as supporters. I think that in just knowing and in seeing that Ascender across the campuses tends to serve more traditional age students, so younger, more 18, 19, first time in college students. The ideas of capital might look a little bit different if you have a more 21st century student population who is older, more students who are parents, or students who work full time, or things like that. If a student is working full time, it's probably not likely that they would have been at the Transfer Motivational Conference, because that would have required them to take multiple days off of work, for instance. Some different ideas that I have thought about, is trying to think about what it has looked like for the students who have transitioned to four-year institutions. I think that we all know and think about Juan Iga's story in particular, because he's kept such a close relationship with us. There have been some phenomenal stories throughout the years that I've heard about, from South Texas College, from Palo Alto, now from ACC, as they've been in the program a little bit longer by now, of students who are now, they're past the bachelor's degree, they're going to graduate school, and they're communicating that back. And so I think, it would be great to be able to document the stories of those students who are beyond their community college, beyond where they started. Also thinking about what students' journeys may have looked like for those who didn't maintain strong ties to the Ascended program, and what were the things that made them successful. And then finally, the impact of COVID. I mean, I talked about how the program builds these in and out of class interactions, that it extends this idea of familia and everything like that. But we know that over the last couple of years, COVID has just upended a lot of the work that we did and are trying to do, but trying to figure out what that looks like in a different format. And so, how the colleges have maintained these ties, these relationships, how they have created connections with students despite the heavy burdens that have been brought on by COVID would be interesting to think about. And so that is the end. I am here for questions and anything that folks may want to talk about.
It's an excellent presentation, Erin. Thank you so much. It
Thank
brought so many memories of the day of the motivational conference when you were conducting some of those interviews. And we do have some of those students on videotape, which is really wonderful for people to see. They can find some of them on our YouTube channel. You know, I arrived a little bit late and I did not get the citation for the article.
Oh, okay.
If you could please post it again,
Sure.
I would appreciate it. Mhm.
One sec.
And I don't want to manipulate the time, so I'll let others go first. If not, I'll come back at the end.
Sure. I will also put a link if anybody wants to read the Yosso article. That's one that's pretty widely accessible. So yeah, there is a link. Alejandra, I just put it in the chat.
Good. You know, we have one of our former members that now lives in California, Lori Buckles. And it's great to see you here with us, Lori. I'm wondering what you think about our framework now that you're far from it and but yet still connected, you know, with us and regarding our framework and what that's about.
Well, I miss being part of the program very much. It's one of the most effective programs that I've been a part of in my career. And I say that from a place that feels a lot like love. Like I just felt really embraced by the whole program. And I could see how that's what the students felt too. So now that I'm here at a college that really has no similar programs at all, I'm just trying to think about how to import what I know, but also it would be great to like form a program just like that here. So those are my initial thoughts.
Excellent, thank you. Well, we should work on coming your way. We actually had a conversation this week about the pressure we're having right now to go national after we won the EDGE commendation for excellence in undergraduate education. So as you know, part of our history is that we have grown to where people have migrated to. So as someone left a college, they pushed until they brought us to that institution. So maybe we'll continue that that pattern. But it's great to see you again with us.
Thank you. Yeah, that would be exciting. If I can help in any way, just keep me in mind.
So Mario asked in the chat if there's any information or insight about the students' pathway choices and their respective experiences. You know, I recall within this study asking students what their majors are, and I know that their majors are listed in the article that I did, but you know, I think it just depended on how much students wanted to speak to that and how much they felt it was salient. I recall that for the student who ended up wanting to go to Syracuse University, for instance, she just talked about how she wanted to study graphic design because she was a huge gamer. And you know, something that I remember being a really compelling story that she told was how much the support within Ascender was so important to her because her mother was incredibly not supportive of her wanting to go into graphic design, that her mother didn't see a clear path to a job, didn't understand like why she didn't want to go be a nurse or a teacher or something like that. And so for her, I think being able to research the transfer process and to figure out a plan for herself was very much an act of rebellion and a way to get out of what sounded like a pretty toxic family environment.
I want to comment, not so much a question, but it was very interesting to me because we do the cultural wealth walk with our students as they come in the first couple of weeks in learning frameworks, to get them to acknowledge the wealth, the capital wealth that they bring to the program. But I had never thought of the capital wealth that they gain through the program. So I don't know, I just connected it would be interesting to do like a when they come into the program, the same questions that you asked when they come into the program, and then this capital wealth that they gain as because when we take them to the motivational conference, they enter the phase where they don't have the full support of the program as the 2 semesters when they're supported. So it's very, very interesting. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much, Erin. You did a wonderful job. You always do.
Thank you. Oh, well, thank you. I mean, I wanted to say I've done community walks or asset-based walks like that before. I've done those when I've asked doctoral students to evaluate neighborhoods that might be otherwise overlooked or seen as under-resourced, as not as wealthy and all of these different things. And I think that the beauty of this kind of theory and this kind of framework is that it can really reframe and it can really help you find beauty and hope and things like that in spaces where it might otherwise not be as obvious to outsiders. Marisa has asked when, okay. Thank you, Alejandra. When the motivational conference is.
Yes, it's going to be the week of, or the weekend of June 9th to the 11th. Usually students would arrive that Thursday and they would be engaged all day Friday and leave by noon on Saturday. And the idea is to give them the opportunity to experience what it's like to live at the dorm, eat at the dining hall, and to learn from the people in financial aid, admissions, housing, and at the same time engage in conversations about career choices. So there will be some information posted online and also on our website if anyone is interested. And regarding that topic of career exploration and the transfer conference, and to address Mario's point, I did look at a equity gap analysis from Austin Community College, and it did not highlight our students in particular, but they did talk about Latino students in a conversation that I had with them as a follow-up. And part of what they were stating was that our students were getting credentials that did not pay very much, that most of them were choosing education or social work and that kind of thing. And in order to address this issue, we're actually going to have a workshop at the seminar, the spring seminar, to be held March 31st, April 1st, on what are credentials of value. Do students follow their passion or their paycheck? And what can we do to ensure that they make informed decisions? You know what I mean? If you value giving back to your community and that's what you choose to do, many of us do that, fine, you make, you know, your own choice. But at the same time, they should know what the labor market pays for that kind of program. So we're all learning together. So any ideas, and do join us on those days of the spring seminar to talk about it a little bit more.
I came in, I'm with Southwest Texas Junior College, and I came in with the program fairly late in August. And so my question is about the motivational conference, because as the counselor and advisor,
Yes.
I'm just curious at what my responsibility is. And if this motivational conference is for the new cohort to fall 22 for those students?
Well, you've only been with the program 1 year, so usually it would be the students that are currently with you know, with the college that started with the program.
Thank you.
Okay, is there maybe one more question before we end things? Okay.
No, I think so.
I wanted to let y'all know there will not be a March webinar, in part because of the spring seminar, in part just for folks that might be on spring break. So we will pick up in April. We have a webinar from two faculty members at Texas Christian University who are talking about student services and integrating student services into the work that we do. So I hope you'll join us for that. And thank you for coming, and thank you for the great conversation.
Thank you, Erin. Wonderful